Welcome to See Mom Learn, a podcast for the perpetually curious, created by me, a lifelong learner, a home educator, and a talent development professional. I am a lifelong student of the Bible. I'm an educator both at home and at work, and in the last few years, I've had the privilege of studying Charlotte Mason and her philosophies on education, connections, and mother culture. See Mom Learn was born out of the intersection of these interests, my love of learning, education, and growth. After all, there's a lesson in everything if we're just willing to see it. Today, let's start with how the structure of the Bible inspires me as a creative, as a learner, and as a trainer. I really consider the Bible my introduction to the liberal arts. The Old Testament, it can be divided into 5 sections. The first, the book of Moses, introduces us to the rules of engagement, or the law. In my own learning, I find it incredibly helpful to begin with exploring these natural and divine laws. For example, I may prep for my own writing by studying the elements of compelling stories. Or when I homeschool, I might study what experts think is developmentally appropriate for my kiddos. The second section of the Old Testament is the books of history, and mostly these books talk about how people either completely disregarded or obeyed the law over the generations. The books of history are about precedents, how, when, and to what extent the law applies. So for me, this is a natural correlation to the scientific method. We have a rule, we have a way things will play out in our mind, a hypothesis about what will happen if we do or do not abide by the rule. And then the testing comes. The people of the Bible periodically have no time to listen to or worship God. So they literally test God. When I started the next chapter of my book, maybe I'm not completely sold on the formula, so I test the boundaries of storytelling. Knowing the history of great works that have gone before, it's not only helpful, but I pull from this great literature at many points in my own writing. The stories that go before us are so important. And in the other example, after hours of lesson planning, the real test is how successful those lessons are in supporting the learning of my students. And knowing historical contexts, right? How my student had responded in previous lessons or modifications other homeschoolers employed, this could be invaluable. The proof is in the pudding. Now that I've shared the first 2 sections of the Old Testament, the law, and history, let's move to my favorite section, the books of wisdom. These are sometimes called books of poetry, and I love that the books of wisdom also go by the name of books of poetry. I write and perform poetry and taught creative writing for many years. I find reading and listening to poetry incredibly grounding. And when I discovered Charlotte Mason was also a poet, I grew to love her works even more. So for our previous examples, I would seek that my writing be informed by the rules of literature, that it be informed by great works and the stories that go before us, but that it also be authentic and beautiful. And for the lesson plan we've been working on, I would seek that it be precise and accurate, as well as attractive. On the topic of wisdom, I recently completed a yoga teacher training with the Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. I knew it would be challenging, but it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. More on that in a later episode. For me, yoga is like a prayer of the body, and the incorporation of meditation and self-reflection, well, they're poetry in its purest form. Yoga is often described as a wisdom practice, and I found this description to be incredibly, incredibly well placed. So once the Bible covers the law, the history, once it covers poetry and wisdom, it moves on to the major and minor prophets, or biographies, right? How does the Bible inform my own mother culture and growth? Why would I consider the Bible my introduction to the liberal arts? I value each of these areas: natural and divine laws, macro history like sociology, right? Poetry, art, philosophy, and the micro histories like biography. And knowledge about them continually expands the way I see the world around me. That in itself is my definition of learning. Here are some reflections. Today, I talked about a few of the ideas that shape the way I look at education. How does your own background inform the way you educate? What does it do to inform the way you learn. Take some time to jot down your initial thoughts, and this can help you identify what you value and perhaps where your blind spots and your biases can creep up. 2, have you considered how your belief system influences your style as a home educator or as a learner? Revisiting this list can help fuel your focus in learning and help reignite a love for learning when you or your learners experience a rough patch in your learning journey. Until next time, I'm sending you love, light, and living books from See Mom Learn.